Former Alabama Governor Don Siegelman talks about some of the things that we can do to make this country more righteous. Check this out. Leave your comments, ding the bell, share it with your friends, and subscribe to our channel. We have been talking basically for several days now about how the white power structure, particularly in the South, but increasingly all across the United, well, it's always been all across the United States, but the South is just famous for it. It's just a little more subtle in the North. Keep black and brown people down. And I wanted to talk to Don Siegelman about this. He is the last Democratic governor of Alabama from 1999 to 2003. He was lieutenant governor from 1995 to 1999. He was the attorney general, the chief law enforcement officer for that state from 1987 to 1991, and the secretary of state from 79 to 87. He's the author of a new book, Stealing Our Democracy, which I wrote an endorsement of. StealingOurDemocracy.com and DonSiegelman.org are his websites, and you can tweet him at Don Siegelman. Governor, welcome back to the program. It's good having you with us. I'm wondering your thoughts on this intersection of racism and police violence as we're seeing it acted out today, right now.
Well, Tom, I've got several things that I think I can add to this discussion. First of all, radically transforming the economy, education, healthcare, and criminal justice is possible, can happen, and must happen. And as evidence of my proposition that it can happen, I point to myself as a Southern white guy, anti-war, Jane Fonda, Robert Kennedy liberal who opposed George Wallace, supported Charles Evers, the brother of Medgar Evers, when he was running for governor of Mississippi. And yet I was able to be elected, as you just noted, to the 4 top offices in probably one of the reddest states in America. My point is, we can do things. We can make things better. We just got to have the will, the political will, and to do it. And I think, and I hope, and I pray that what we have seen and witnessed over the last several days will give our politicians the guts to make the changes in our economy and education and healthcare and in criminal justice that will produce true justice for every man and woman, regardless of where they're from, the economic status, the color of their skin, whether they're immigrants or citizens. We need to give the white supremacist psyche in this country a lobotomy and change our makeup and our belief that somehow or another white people are somehow superior from everybody else. We're not. And it's time that we just got over it. And we've got to make these changes, or else we're going to continue to see this kind of disruption in our society and violence and abuse that just needs to be put to an end. I speak to these issues because I lived through a lot of this as a Southern, white guy. Fortunately, I was raised by parents that had good sense. Not that we weren't subjected to racism and awful things as we were growing up, but I lived through the church bombings and the Freedom Riders and the call for segregation now, segregation tomorrow, segregation forever by George Wallace when he raised the Confederate battle flag over the state capitol, and 5 months later the Ku Klux Klan, feeling emboldened by his words, blew up the 16th Street Baptist Church, killing 4 innocent girls. The same thing is going on today, and I've written about it in my book, because the verbal attacks by Donald Trump against Mexicans and the call for the wall and his reluctance to distance himself from the Klan or from Confederate flags or Confederate statues all add to give a false sense of a green light to people who want to do violence and stir up racist hatred and bigotry, and we've just got to put it to an end. I'm off my
Governor, I have I have an op-ed today over on alternet.org suggesting that qualified immunity, this doctrine that the Supreme Court established during the Reagan Revolution in 1982, making it almost impossible to prosecute cops. I mean, we all across the country right now, we're seeing police behaving badly. And some protesters behaving badly as well, but we're speaking specifically about the police here. And in many cases, they're being fired. But I have yet, outside of the cop who murdered George Floyd, I have yet to hear of any of them being arrested for things that, if you or I as civilians did, we would be subject to immediate arrest. Beating people and violating their constitutional civil rights, or just their human rights, just their humanity. And so I'm calling for both the Supreme Court, which may be examining this issue, maybe picking up a case next week to examine this issue. There's 6 of them before them, and Congress. And we have at least one member of Congress, Julian Castro, who is saying, let's introduce legislation ending limited immunity, or qualified immunity is the legal phrase for police. Let's do away with that. And I'm expanding that and saying, let's do away with qualified immunity for Facebook as well, which is a different part of the law. Section 203 of the Telecommunications Act, as amended by the Decency Act of '96, I think it is. And so I'm saying here's 2 specific things that we can do. If you were governor now, what specifically would you do to help bring some of these things into realization? And looking back on your years as governor, what do you wish you had done differently?
Well, let me start by saying, yes, we need to remove the qualified immunity from police, but also we in prosecution as well. The Supreme Court of the United States in 1976 gave blanket immunity to prosecutors to willfully and intentionally present false evidence, or to willfully and intentionally withhold exculpatory evidence in order to get an indictment or conviction. That pronouncement by the court was also embedded by Congress in the Federal Tort Claims Act. We now today prosecutors.
Yeah, you're talking about Pearson v. Ray, right?
Yes, and what has to happen is we've got to remove the qualified the immunity from prosecutors, so that
right.
when police are brought before when the charge is brought before a grand jury, that prosecutors can no longer lie, cheat, and steal in order to set the guilty free or to indict the innocent. And what has happened systematically over the course of this country is that prosecutors go into a grand jury with the attitude that they're going to protect the police no matter what. And they have done that consistently. Eric Gardner, wasn't even, Bill Barr let him off the hook.
The murderer of Eric Gardner.
The murderer off the hook. Yeah, so we have.
Yeah, we have just 15 seconds, Governor, by the way.
Well, we've got to put an end to racial hatred and violence on the part of police, and I have a plan to do it in my book.
Cool. Yeah, and I am absolutely fine with promoting your book. I think it's absolutely brilliant. Governor Don Siegelman of Alabama, the last Democratic governor of Alabama, his new book, it just came out. It's called Stealing Our Democracy, and it's absolutely brilliant. Check it out. Governor, thanks for dropping by and talking with us.
Yes, sir. Thank you, Tom.